and you'll destroy all your faith. Or the same way you try to resolve contradictions and issues within your own text that you consider sacred, use the same methodology in the New Covenant writings, and you'll conclude that the writings are reliable. Of course, there are certain places where the New Covenant writings are especially attacked, like Acts 7, Stephen's speech. And how could he make so many errors? After all, he was filled with the Spirit. Well, all that Luke does in Acts is accurately records what Stephen said or the summary of what Stephen said. He doesn't, if his goal was to try to make something sound perfectly correct, then certain statements that may have sounded a little different or where Stephen compressed a few different things into one, he could have rewritten it. That was not his goal. And nowhere does it say that because Stephen was preaching full of the Spirit, that if he made reference to a historical event, that he was going to reference it with exactness. I don't see anywhere where it says if you're filled with the Spirit and you're recounting history, you will therefore recount it perfectly. So I have zero problem if someone says that some of what Stephen recalled as he's going through history doesn't seem to be accurate. And I have no problem with those that meticulously look and say, actually, there are answers. And you'll find this again in your encyclopedias of Bible difficulties or evangelical commentaries on Acts, where they'll say, well, you could probably resolve this if Stephen puts these accounts. Or one Orthodox Jewish scholar recently treated it and said, no, you're reading it wrong when you're trying to read it like that. You're reading it through the wrong lens. Professor James Kugel. But I just want to sing out one little thing to show you how the anti-missionary mind can look at some of this stuff and come to ridiculous conclusions. So here, Acts 7:14. Acts 7:14. It says this. Stephen's speech. He says, after this, talking about Israel's ancient history, after this, Joseph sent for his father and his whole family, 75 in all. Well, if you'll read the text in the Torah, it makes reference to 70. So did he just get it wrong? Well, according to Rabbi Tovia Singer, to give you one example, what happened was Stephen got it wrong, and then, quote, the early church went and started to change all of the Septuagint manuscripts, because Rabbi Singer acknowledges that the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, were already translated by the rabbis into Greek, the Septuagint. He just wrongly denies that the rest of the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek before the time of Yeshua, whereas we know it was. So, quote, he claims they were so sloppy when they altered the Jewish scriptures. This is the early church, the great conspiracy here. They were so sloppy when they altered the Jewish scriptures to corroborate with Acts that although you'll find in the Septuagint that Genesis 46 does say 75 and that Exodus 1:5 does say 75, they were so hurried in covering their tracks they forgot about Deuteronomy 10:22. Deuteronomy 10:22 in the Septuagint says 70. They forgot to change the last one. Okay. So, here's what happened. There were 100 street signs saying, house number 204 is down this block. And then, when they were building the house, they mistakenly painted the number 206 because they were so sloppy. And then they thought, we better go change all those signs. And then they raced and changed the signs, but they forgot to change one of them. Now, common sense would tell you, if you're going to change something, just change the number of the house. If you're going to change something, just change what Stephen said here. Don't try to change all the Septuagint manuscripts, which are Jewish manuscripts that are known. So did they somehow discover every last one? Okay, there's another one over there in Egypt. We've got to go over to Egypt and find that and change it, or it'll be a contradiction. No, all top Septuagint scholars recognize that 75 was just based on a different counting. You could count family one way, you could include in-laws, you can include sons-in-law, you can include grandchildren or not. And it's a very simple computation. Septuagint manuscripts in some of the cases where they were talking about those that went down into Egypt, said 75. And in one incident in Deuteronomy, as Tovia Singer would claim, it just mentions 70. There's not an argument. It all depends on how they're counted in a simple way. But Stephen was just referencing a tradition reflected in the Jewish Septuagint. The idea that the early church changed the manuscript to line up with this is so preposterous that you won't find it treated in a serious scholarly work about the Septuagint anywhere. But not only so, there's actually support from the Dead Sea Scrolls for this position too, if my memory serves me right. In other words, this was a well-known Jewish tradition, a well-known Jewish number, and depending on how you count it, you could say 70 went down into Egypt, or you could say 75, and there's an explanation. You actually read texts where you can see, okay, they were counting these people. It's that simple. It is not this diabolical conspiracy where they're going out. You know, they snuck into all the Jewish synagogues, and they found all the Bibles and changed it so they'd think Stephen's speech was right. I mean, who would think like that? Well, if you think that all these Christian missionaries are deceptive, especially the Messianic Jewish ones, and they prey on the elderly and the sick and the feeble-minded, then you could believe all this stuff. But when you realize that's not how it happened, plus it's completely contrary to any historical possibility that it happened like this, you don't try to use crazy weights and measures. You say, oh, that's why Stephen said 75, because that's how it read in the Septuagint, and there were other Jewish traditions that stated it. As James Kugel pointed out, that a lot of Stephen's speech must be seen against a Jewish tradition of the day mindset, without trying to resolve every apparent contradiction. So what about this notion, though, that some texts are just completely misquoted? In other words, okay, internal contradictions, fine, you resolve them the same way you resolve them in the Hebrew Bible. Apparent historical issues, errors, resolve them the same way, although you'll find far more issues to deal with in terms of apparent contradictions and historical questions regarding the Hebrew Scriptures than you will regarding the New Testament, and you'll find a ton more regarding the Talmud as compared to New Covenant writings. But what about if they just misquote something so blatantly that they could not possibly have been reading the Bible intelligently? Again, I'll quote Rabbi Singer just as a representative voice. Moreover, in an effort to distance Christians from a compelling Jewish message, the founders and defenders of Christianity methodically altered selected texts from the Jewish scriptures. This rewriting of Tanakh was not done arbitrarily or subtly. The church quite deliberately tampered with the words of the Jewish scriptures in order to bolster their most startling claim, which is the Old Testament foretold of no Messiah other than Jesus of Nazareth. With this goal in mind, missionaries manipulated, misquoted, mistranslated, and even fabricated verses in Tanakh in order to make Jesus' life fit traditional Jewish messianic parameters and to make traditional Jewish messianic parameters fit the life of Jesus. Again, I told you there's this funny contradiction where we're told, well, Jesus did, you read the Gospels, he actually didn't fulfill any of the messianic prophecies. And then we're told, well, they rewrote the Gospels to make them fulfill the prophecies, and then they changed the prophecies to make them fit the life of Jesus, but actually he didn't fulfill anything. It's again, one of those funny self-contradictory positions. The King James Version and numerous other Christian Bible translations were meticulously altered